Okay, because it may go up online later. Okay, so I'm gonna share the travels I've had. I'm not gonna go through like every place I've been or anything. I do have a map at least, so you can see that. But more the lessons I learned. So we'll go through each continent that I've been to in the order I went to them. So I started on, oh, I gotta figure out how to, there we go. We'll start out in North America, but as I was doing this, actually, let's get this out of the way. There we go. As I was doing this, I was trying to figure out like not what I was gonna talk about, but like how to narrow down traveling to all the continents into an hour. And what I came to is like, I just had to find some stories that fit with the lessons that I've learned. Some of the lessons are really obvious. Like I knew them as soon as they happened, or like when I kept traveling, or when I came back here, like I knew that like this is a specific pinpoint time when I learned that lesson. And other ones, it was like, you've kind of learned it all the time, but I had to choose stories that would fit that. So I thought this was a really good quote. The truth about stories is that's all we are. So these are parts of my story. And there's many more as well. So I started in North America. I was born in Milwaukee. So here's some pictures from when I was really little and when I was not quite as little, and then when I was older. So I'm from Wisconsin. I've mostly lived in Wisconsin my whole life. One summer I spent in Taiwan and one summer I spent in Pennsylvania. But other than that, I've lived here as my home base around the state. I think I've lived in almost all the area codes because Waukesha used to be 414. But I just haven't lived over like in the Fox Valley. But Wisconsin, I feel like is definitely my home. And the story of traveling really starts with my grandpa. And my grandpa went to all 7 continents. So that's kind of where the inspiration for this came from, is that he did it. And it was something like my family was like, yeah, let's try to do that too. So he took us traveling with him. This is me in Arizona with him when I was 7. This is him also, I think, on a riverboat on the Nile. Now that I have been on one, I'm pretty sure that's what that is. I did not dress up like that, but they do sell you stuff to do that. But he'd been to all 7 continents, and I made that one of my goals to do as well. In addition to going to all 7 continents, what's the question you think everybody would ask him? You've been everywhere, right? What's your favorite one? So his favorite one, I don't have the answer to which location may have been his favorite, because his answer was the best place in the world is where he was. So this is where I live, between Rice Lake and Cumberland. So this is what I can wake up to on a beautiful wintry morning that I never had this winter. I think I had it a couple days. But just taking advantage of where you are, no matter where it is that first lesson. Like I honestly can't tell you what his favorite place when he traveled was, because I have no idea. It was always where we were, or where he was with us. Other days when he wasn't with us, he was also happy there. You didn't have to hear me and my brother arguing. So yeah, that was the first lesson that I had. So anybody can be happy with where they are if they have that mentality. So the next continent I went to was Europe. When I was 7, we went to England, Scotland, and Wales. My uncle was stationed in Scotland in the Navy. So we visited him in the US a lot, but he was in Scotland that year, and we went to visit him. And then when I was 9, we went to Italy. My grandpa took us with him there. So this is Italy. This is the photo book my parents gave me. I was like, can you give me those photo books? And I got Italy. So here's me and my family in the streets of Italy. But the lesson I got from that, so it's not typical for a lot of young people to go abroad at such a young age, which will tie into the lesson from Europe. But I got more of this lesson when I got a bit older, because we were on a tour in Italy. I remember Italy better than England. So if you're gonna bring your kids abroad, make sure that they can remember it a little better, is my advice, I guess, because I don't remember England too much. the pictures help me. But when I was in college, I went to Europe as part of a program that was part of the Natural Resources College at Stevens Point. So we could go to a camp in northern Wisconsin, or we could go to Europe. Only 40 people could go to Europe through our program. And I was one of the ones that did the year I was there. So here's some of the places we went. We traveled around with a bunch of students that were from the United States. So we weren't like immersed in the culture so much. But we hiked in Poland near the Slovakian border. Here we are looking at glacier in Iceland. And then because it was natural resources, we did stuff related to natural resources, doing some studying and learning with professors. So this last picture is us. We're being part of a deer count in Germany. And it was raining that day. We're hiding under I don't know exactly why we're hiding underneath the bracken fern, but maybe because it's less wet there. Our whole group only saw like one deer, so I did not. But still, even that type of trip is a little bit different than what everybody else might do. You don't have the opportunity usually to go and talk with professors and people who are from there. But really, what was the most memorable part of our trip was we got 2 weekends off. And one of the weekends, me and these 2 guys, we decided we were going to walk from where they left us in France. Most people, like, you would get on a train and go somewhere, but it was cheaper to not go somewhere. So we were in France and we needed to get back to the place where we were staying in Germany. So we decided to just like walk back to Germany because somehow we thought that it was going to be cheaper to cross the border on foot, which isn't the case. But we walked for 30 kilometers. And we walked through like this fortified old city. We crossed over the river and got back into Germany. And then we were looking for the train station. I know a little bit of French. I took French in high school. And the person that we were talking to, she didn't understand French at all. So I could see France, and she spoke German and not French. We did somehow, I don't remember how the story ended. I remember that part, but we must have found a train station and made our way back to where we had to get. So we got off the beaten track there. Most people did not just hike back. We camped a night in a campground, and that was definitely a different campground than we would have here, like pretty open and lots of people in it. So and the other weekend that I had off, we went to Switzerland and went to the mountain hostel. And Switzerland is beautiful and it also rains. So we decided we weren't gonna go hiking for a bunch of days in the rain, and we went to the train station because we could find it there because we came from the train station that weekend. And pick the cheapest big city to go to. So we ended up going to Milan, Italy, which we must have had a boundary too. We weren't gonna like go across the continent. So we went to Milan, which is in northern Italy, and got off the train, and we didn't know where to go. I was better off than in Germany because I could speak French. I could read some Italian because of that Latin base. So that's the first time I was able to kind of realize that I could like connect the French with the Italian. I'm gonna have to go back to Italy, but like I was able to like get the gist of what was going on. We bought a map. There was a big building with a cross on it in the middle, or cross-shaped building in the middle. We decided to walk towards that because that's gotta be where stuff is, right? So we came to Duomo, which is a massive cathedral that's beautiful. It was built over 1,000 years, so there's a lot of different eras of architecture in it. At some point while we were there, we did get a tour of it and got to walk on the roof of it. We also had to find a place to stay. And in Europe, they don't always have the same idea of vacation as we do. So when we got to Milan, we found out most places were closed because everyone was on holiday. So it took a little while to find a place to sleep. We did find a hotel. I think there were like 6 of us. We found a hotel and were able to stay in Milan. But those are things that you don't think about when you get off the beaten track. So I'm gonna tie in some places. So this is not in Europe. I'm gonna tie in some different places with the lessons. So it's like I'm focusing on Europe and going off and doing our own thing on the weekends, and then I might bring it to another place as well. That really highlighted it too, because some of these things, it's like multiple places I really connected with these lessons. So when I was in India with my parents, we were on a tour, and I'm not the best tour taker because I want to go do my own thing. But when I'm on a tour, because my parents brought me, I'm very thankful. But one evening we had extra time in the evening, and we could, most people, I think everyone else on our tour just stayed at the hotel. It's like, we're in India. Like, I can sit in my room at home any day I want. So my parents and I, we went down to the desk at the hotel and got a taxi and got tours of all the, not all of them, there's way more than all, but of a bunch of temples in Varanasi. And Varanasi is the holiest city in Hinduism. So we were there to see the Ganges and other things. So we had a lot of stuff we were doing. But this was just like with the taxi driver. He drove us around in his broken English. He told us about the temples. I remember like kind of translating for my parents. He spoke English, but it was not very good English. But he would try to tell us the stories that were happening on the walls. And we got to see a bunch of Hindu, and then the one on the left is a Hindu temple. The one on the right is a Jain temple, which is another religion. So Hinduism and Jainism are really big in India. This is also not too far from where Buddhism started as well, which I don't have a picture of. But an epicenter of many religions. So it was cool to like get out and like be with the people of India, going to the temples. When you go in a temple, you have to take off your shoes, and tourists often have to pay more, which isn't much. Because we took off our shoes at the first temple, and then our taxi driver comes and yells at us, and he's like, no, like, wait for me. I'm gonna get you like my price. Because we paid the equivalent of 10 cents to have somebody watch our shoes, and he would pay 1 cent. So like to us, it was like not clearly a big deal, but it also just gives perspective of like how much more money we have just to spend on somebody watching our shoes than many people. And then one of the stories someone else on our tour had told is like he tipped someone really well at a bar, I think in another country in Southeast Asia. And then the boss of the bar was mad because if you tip really well, they won't come back to work the next day. Because if you have the money, why would you go work? Which I guess you can also look at our system too and see how we work for benefits often. And if you didn't have those benefits, you might choose to do something different with your day. So just kind of seeing the parallels, well, different, like something that parallels with our society too, and how we set things up to make sure that people are showing up is different than in India. But also there's those things in common. So this second lesson from Europe is get off the beaten track, which I really like doing. So next we're gonna move to South America. And this is one where as soon as it happened, I was aware. So I went to Machu Picchu, which is obviously epic. And I was disappointed because it looks like the pictures. You go around the corner and it looks just like the pictures. And I was like, that's it. And somebody else I was talking to recently said they went there and had that same experience. So it's not just me. But so I wasn't like disappointed to be there, but I just thought it was going to be better than the pictures, I guess. I'm not sure. I guess I allowed it to redeem itself by going the next day. So the mountain behind it is Huayna Picchu. And each day they let 400 people climb up onto it. And you have to get up really early and beat everybody else up there. You can either take the bus or you can hike up. There's a hiking trail that goes up there. But if you're like the 401st person, like you're out of luck. So we decided that we weren't gonna wake up to get in line for the bus. We were just gonna wake up a little later and hike up. It probably took an hour. It isn't super steep. And one thing that isn't one of my lessons is bring a headlamp with you because you never know when you're gonna need it. Because we used headlamps to get up there because it was dark when we started. We did get up there within the first 400 people. And then you'd also need to get off the mountain before 10 a.m. because the wind started picking up. So it's a safety reason. And as you can tell, my brother's in that picture, it's very steep. So that's what the stairs look like on Huayna Picchu because it's a very steep mountain. I can go back there so you can kind of see how, like, it doesn't look like you could walk on it, but we did. And it was really beautiful to go up there and see that. So I guess I got to redeem Machu Picchu experience a little bit because we got to go up there. But then I carried that forward, and when I was in India again, I went to the Taj Mahal, and I remember thinking about Machu Picchu, and I was like, I need to not expect it to be whatever the pictures look like in my head. So I just like wanted it to like be what it was going to be in front of me because it was going to be amazing. And it was amazing. So if I had expected it to be whatever my mind thought it was going to be, I may have been disappointed again. But I learned my lesson, so I didn't do it. So there's the Taj Mahal, which is amazing to look at. So and walk around. And then my last part of the lesson is in November, I went to Petra in Jordan. And I'd heard of Petra. I know I've seen pictures of Petra. I know that's a highlight of going to Jordan is going to Petra. But I honestly, the night before, I was like, I don't remember what it looks like. I was like, I could look it up. You know, I have internet. And I was like, or I could just not and show up tomorrow and see what it looks like, right? Because it's down the valley. So you hike down a slot canyon, kind of like out west in Utah. And it's pretty paved, like they've made it very accessible. You can also ride on a camel because they paved it. You can ride, I don't think it was a horse. You can, if you want help getting down, there's also animals that will get you down there. But we hiked down, and around a corner is the treasury, which is, these are actually all tombs. But whoever named them thought they were certain things. But the treasury is the one in the middle. So you're around the corner and there's this massive tomb in front of you in really colorful sandstone. So it was like the most amazing, probably like day of my life, because I was just like, I didn't have expectations about it. And I was like, allowed myself to just let it be what it was, like truly, because I didn't remember what it was supposed to be. I hiked a lot that day, so I went and hiked up this other tomb on the side, is the monastery, and it's like up on a mountain overlooking the desert to the west. So if you turn around, there's like desert and it's lowlands and stuff like that. So it was really cool to go up there. And I met somebody up there that skis the Birkie, or from Norway, that was going to ski the Birkie. So and also this kitten climbed up on my shoulder. So there were lots of cats there. There's also people selling stuff as well, but it didn't feel intrusive. But there were lots and lots of cats and kittens, and they were very friendly in Petra, and that was a highlight as well. So cats and beautiful sandstone carvings are great. So the lesson 3 from South America is let it be what it is. Now we'll go to Asia. And I mentioned, I think before, that I went to Taiwan for a summer to work. I worked at a summer camp there. It was an English speaking adventure camp. I think I learned 2 words in Chinese all summer. It's hard to read, and then they have different ways of spelling stuff in English. But we have lots of people, lots of city, and then there's also nature in Taiwan, in these pictures, that's what they are. So when I first got there, I took a week traveling around Taiwan, and I kind of went around the island clockwise, and the first place I went was Torogo Gorge National Park, and I was by myself. I met with different, sometimes I met up with couch surfers, which I'll talk a little bit more about couch surfing in a little bit. So people that I intentionally met, and other times I would just meet random people like this girl when we were like sightseeing. And there aren't a whole lot of white tourists in Taiwan. I think a lot of people go to China to be tourists, but Taiwan is kind of missed. And then it's even less common that I'm a woman. So there would be men that I would see that were tourists, but there weren't a lot of women, especially alone. So I think I was all kind of a novelty, so people wanted to take pictures and they wanted to practice their English and stuff. But people were always really friendly. So Torogo Gorge, I got to explore a bit. And on my way down, so it's a gorge, you go uphill to go into the park, and you go downhill to go back down to the train. I don't remember how I got up into the park. They might have had a shuttle. But on the way out, I didn't have a great connection down, and I wasn't going to walk a couple miles. So it's legal to hitchhike there. So I had a map that was in English and in Chinese. So I knew what I was pointing at, and they could read it. And I was able to get a ride down to the bottom, and then I could go to the train station. So I was able to meet people there and trust people. So like some of these lessons, because I know what's ahead, it kind of intermingled. So then I continued on and went to Little Luisiu Island, which is off the coast of the southwest coast of Taiwan. And this island was supposed to have bioluminescent algae in the water. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna go like on a kayak ride and look at this bioluminescent algae. And I didn't see any algae. I went to like where I thought it was supposed to be. There weren't any people either, like that might give a tour. But nearby I heard some people and they were having a barbecue and they didn't know what I was talking about. They knew English. They didn't know what these algae were, but they were like, join us for our barbecue. So I did. So they kind of adopted me for the night and part of the next day. So I camped on my own, so I didn't stay with them, but I hung out with them and then we met back up when we went back across on the ferry. I forgot to mention, there may not have been algae because there was a typhoon coming in and that's similar to a hurricane, but it wasn't super windy or anything. So that might've been why like the algae weren't really doing too much and most definitely why there may not have been a tour because it wouldn't necessarily be safe depending on how bad a typhoon got. We took the ferry back across to the mainland of Taiwan and they showed me around Kaohsiung, which is well known for their fish candy. So here's a picture of some fish candy. It's like little dried fish, little dried shrimps. And I'll try most things once. I tried it and it tastes like dried fish. They loved it that when they come to this part of the country, they like stock up on it because this is a area that's known for it. And I also made friends with a cat who liked the fish candy better than me. So I did bring some back from my parents. My mom would not touch it. My dad tried it, but then our cats also like fish candy too. So I biked around Little Luisiu Island and saw, this was a temple. I did some hiking. So I rented a bike on the island to get around and just check it out for the day. So I mentioned couch surfers. So couch surfing is a website where you can meet people. Sometimes you might just meet like for coffee. So sometimes when I'm on a tour, I'll just meet people to like meet local people. You can also find a place to sleep too. So we've hosted people, Ryan just walked in, we've hosted couch surfers at our house. There aren't too many here because we're in northern Wisconsin, but occasionally we'll get one here or there. They usually all come in like the same month for some reason. But I really enjoy getting to know local people and kind of getting a feel for what a place is like from those local people. So this picture is actually not the movie theater we went to, but it's from Jaipur in India. In India, one of the couch surfers I met, we went to a movie and the English movie wasn't playing at the hour that worked for us. So we went to the Hindi movie. So I couldn't understand the words, but it was like a rom-com. So I totally knew what was happening the whole time. He would tell me like what was happening, but I also could just kind of tell from what was going on. And Bollywood movies also have a lot of singing and dancing randomly. So think of a rom-com plus like a musical every couple of minutes. So, and then also this is in Iceland, the second picture. And on Airbnb, you can meet locals and they can teach you different things. So here locally, I do a foraging Airbnb experience. And this is Hannah Mia in Iceland. She's a famous folk singer and songwriter. In Iceland, you probably haven't heard of her yourselves, but she told us stories from Iceland. She played some music for us, so some of the songs that she sings to her toddler. So it was just really interesting to get like some backstory to the history and to being Icelandic. So I really enjoyed having some time with her to be able to really get to know the culture a lot better. So I'm just going to skip ahead. So lesson 4 is meet the locals and other travelers. You'll find things in common everywhere. So go back here. So everywhere you go, there's different ways that people honor their ancestors. So while they're very different, people honor the people who came before them. And then I've also found that water is life. The hieroglyphic, which is the second picture, our guide on our trip in Egypt in November, like he showed it to us and that's what he said. He said, this hieroglyphic basically says water is life, like that. The zigzag line is water. So this is water from all over the world. And these are things that people have in common. And I've been in different like religious buildings, so mosques and synagogues and churches, temples, and water and oil are both elements that are very, like all of the religions seem to use. So that's something that when I was visiting places, it was like people have these same callings towards these certain elements that are important to us as people. So there's lesson 4 from Asia, or lots of places. Now we'll move to Australia. So in Australia, this is Uluru, which is in the middle of the country. It's a giant red rock and it goes down into the earth really far. Ayers, or also known as Ayers Rock. Uluru actually is owned, like the land is owned by the Aboriginal people there, and they still have people that remember their first contact with the colonizers. So their history is shorter as a country than like ours is a couple hundred years, although some, depending on where in the country you are, first contact would have been later than the 1600s. But they own the land and then the country rents it from them as a national park. So something that people have historically done, or tourists have historically done, is climb Uluru, but the native people have never liked that. That's not appropriate. They have ceremonies they do there. I think only men can climb it. This is where they believe they came out of the earth from. And like back in the 80s, they wanted people to stop climbing it. But the government of Australia, interestingly, as the renter, said, nope, until you find something for people to do, we're going to let people climb it. Because they wanted tourism, they wanted people to come in to see a rock in the middle of the outback. When I was there, within a year of me being there, like they were ramping down any climbing if you were allowed to climb it, but they barely mentioned it, but it was definitely discouraged. Because people go up there, people die up there because it's really hot. And then when people die on the rock, the Aboriginal people have to do a ceremony for them. And these are strangers from who knows where. There's no bathrooms up there, so people would go to the bathroom on it and pollute it. But the Aboriginal people kind of came up with things to do. So we watched the sunset. So that's what a lot of people do. There's also activities. There's a hotel there, but there's activities near the hotel to learn about cultural things related to the Aboriginal people. So they determined that lots of people were not climbing the rock. The vast majority of tourists were not climbing it. So they got to the point where the government of Australia said, okay, like, here's the timeline, we're gonna close it within, it was like 2 or 5 years or whatever. So now you can no longer climb that rock if you are a tourist. So these are just some other things from that trip as well. So it's okay to do things if the people there are welcoming you into that space. So here in Australia, on the right, we were throwing boomerangs. So that's something that they shared with us, is how to throw a boomerang. I don't think anybody did it well. And then the other one is Maori people in New Zealand. And they did like a ceremony for us. Initially you show up and it's like they're fighting you off, but like it's a tourist thing too. So they're doing things that welcome you into their village so they can show you what some of the stuff they do is like. And then this is a quote I had and something I read recently, just thinking about like what belongs to people. So I'll let you read that. Or does anybody need me to read it out loud? Yes, I can read it out loud. I remember moments in my trips to the ancient sites of Mexico, those outside the cities, next to the sea or deep in the jungles, where I finally felt like nobody was judging me, that I was Mexican enough, even in my solitude, to be in those places that had such memory. And it wasn't like I felt like I belonged to those temple structures or that I could disappear there. I just felt like it was my Mexico, and that somehow I had some relationship to this land, that landmass, and it's the best sense of belonging. And Sherry Moraga is a Chicano author, so she is from, I think, from California, but her ancestors are from Mexico. And just thinking about how, another part of going to Uluru is they would tell us some of the stories with the stuff in related to Uluru. And they then told us that these are the stories we tell children, because this isn't our story. This is their story. This is the story of the people who live there. So we can learn something, but we can never know the stuff that is only for the people, which we can understand a place on some level, but we can never be, like, not everything belongs to us, especially as a tourist. So I kind of bring that here back to the United States, and this is at Lac de Flambeau. I'm throwing an addle. They were showing me how. I was better at that than the boomerang. And then I've gone wild ricing here in Northwest Wisconsin. And just, I am a descendant of immigrants in this land, and the tribes and the DNR have worked together, and I'm able to go wild racing. Any of you, if you're from Wisconsin anyway, can go wild racing in Wisconsin. And that's something that we're allowed to do as non-native people, or I'm allowed to do as a non-native people. I don't know if there's native people in the room, but something I can't do is I can't go walleye spearing because I don't have those rights, because I'm not part of that sovereign nation. So it's something we're understanding the people in a place, whether that's where we live or in another place. Like, we don't have, no matter who you are, you can't just go anywhere and have access to everything because of you're from a certain place and you're from a certain people, and you have rights as that certain people. And I don't have rights as an Ojibwe person because I'm not one of them here. I don't have rights as an Aboriginal person in Australia because I'm not one of them there. So sometimes that's stories and sometimes that's things we can do. So the lesson I got in Australia is having cultural humility. So understanding when people say, you can't have this part of my story because it's not yours, like being okay with that. And I've had Native friends here also say, like, well, I can't tell you about these ceremonies because you're not Native. And it's like, that's totally okay. Like, that is yours, that's not mine. So next we'll go to Antarctica. So it's not the last continent, but the second to last one we went to. So I went to Antarctica in 2022, and it's a really beautiful place, but I feel like what I got out of it was not at all what I was expecting. I mean, I learned a lot about, we went on a National Geographic trip. It was amazing, but I just felt a little bit disconnected from it because for good reason, they have a lot of biosecurity measures. So here's some boots of Ryan's. We went onto land, and every time you go off, you have to, like, walk through a solution and make sure you don't have any little rocks or any bird poop on your shoes because you could be spreading disease. So I totally understand why they have biosecurity, but we also weren't supposed to, like, kneel or touch rocks or stuff like that because you could leave stuff behind. Getting off a boat, I did touch a rock. So. I think most people probably, like, touched something with their hands a little bit, but they told us not to. So it's a really beautiful place, but I just didn't feel connected there. And let me see if I had, okay, I do have that. And then when I came back this is probably Chile, coming back into Argentina, I walked outside and I could smell something, and I asked Ryan if he could smell something. Ryan's sitting here in the front, and what I could smell was green. It was the first time I'd ever smelled green because we're always around plants. They do have two whole plants on Antarctica, but they don't smell a whole lot. It mostly smells like bird poop and ice and ocean. But, like, you could smell the land coming back to South America. And it just smelled alive. And Ryan couldn't quite place it like me. He's like, I smell something. But as soon as I said it, he was like, yep, it is. You can smell green, there's life or whatever. I phrased it at the time. And coming back to Argentina, Argentina is an interesting place. So we were in Argentina when they won the World Cup. So maybe that helps make Antarctica a little bit more of a letdown, because I connected so much with like the electricity in the air when they won. Like we went down to the obelisk, which is in this picture, where people go to celebrate in Argentina. Like the whole city was descending on it, and all night. When we left the next morning to go down to southern Argentina to then get on the boat, all night people were celebrating. Like everyone was so excited that they won the World Cup. And so maybe that connection just, and I don't even care about soccer, to be honest, like, but I wanted them to win because then they would be happy. So I connected with just like how excited they were to be Argentinian. But then also Argentina is kind of an odd place. If you look at their history, they pretty much carried out genocide against all but like the people that live up in the rainforest. So this picture is in a museum, or this model is in a museum. It's in southern Argentina. And the people down there had been pretty much eradicated. There might be some people still that are their descendants in Chile. But one of their presidents had eradicated everybody, like that was his goal. So we didn't quite do that here. But it was an interesting place because I really connected with the electricity of the people that were excited about winning the World Cup, but also it felt like something was missing as well, because there wasn't that knowledge from people who had been there for many generations. So something that I've thought about in other places is when we were in Australia, they talked about how when the British showed up, they said it was terra nullius. And I've actually recently read something from Canada that they said the same thing. Terra nullius means empty land. As we know, Australia wasn't empty, Canada wasn't empty, New Zealand wasn't empty. No, Antarctica is empty, but we are calling it that. We didn't colonize that. So just this idea that people had when they showed up, and these ideas that have continued on, that the land is empty or was empty, those are really harmful, both to the people who moved there and to the people who are already there. So in every place that we are, and even here, like the other day, I heard somebody talk about Native Americans in the past tense, and I was like, they live here today. So that's from the powwow at LCO this summer. So, and then also people always affect the land. In the top one, I've got a statue of I forget the name of the bird, maybe it's a moa. It's like a giant kiwi bird. The Maori people moved there less than 1,000 years ago to New Zealand, and they actually killed off some of those giant birds because when people show up, the ecosystem does change. So they like to have statues of the moa, but like even native people showing up can change the makeup of what's on the land too. So, or what we call indigenous people. So, and then, so thinking about where we connect to the land, like this again is where I live. And in 2020, you probably all know there was a pandemic. And I can kind of go back to my grandpa's lesson of enjoying where you are no matter what. So like, oddly, I had been like, someday I want to stay home for a year and just like watch the seasons. And then we got married, and then we got the opportunity of our lifetime to stay at home and watch the seasons for a while. So connecting with where we are is really important. Like you don't have to travel far to connect and to understand a place in a much deeper way than I can when I go travel abroad. And then the strawberry picture, I was looking through my pictures for this, and when I'm somewhere else, I know plants really well, but I'll notice things that remind me of home. So this is a strawberry like at Machu Picchu, but like there's strawberries there and there's strawberries here. So like you see things that you have in common with other places and connect you to that land a little bit more. I don't know if I ate the strawberry or not, but I probably didn't because don't know what else they have in Peru, but I probably like, at least it probably is a strawberry. But you connect with the place when you see those things in common. So the lesson from Antarctica is human beings, we are part of the places that we are. Then I went to Africa in November. I was in Egypt, which part of me feels like it was like in Africa, obviously, but it's also part of the Middle East. So it's like this convergence. Like I feel like Africa is so much bigger than what I experienced. But here, me and my mom are on some camels. Camels are not from Africa or Egypt, for the record, but they'll put you on a camel and take pictures. So. And that's the one thing I would not recommend from Egypt is camels are scary to ride. So, I mean, I survived, but it's not like riding a horse. So the lesson here started a while ago. About a decade ago, I went to Israel and Palestine. And I remember at the time, nothing big like what's happening now was happening then. But I remember wondering, is it going to be safe there? And I asked some friends that like had been there. I knew somebody that lived in Jordan and was a missionary. And the missionary said like Jordan is like the safest country, like one of the safest countries in the world. They've had like one terrorist attack total in the last, I think, since they began, which is better than our country. People I knew who had been to Israel had said like, just trust the people who are taking you, right? Like if they think it's not safe, they'll tell you. So we went, it was with my mom's church, and we went to Israel and Palestine and saw a lot of really cool places. And here's some of the pictures from there. So I don't know what else to say about that. That's part of getting to Egypt. So anyone who knows me knows I went to like Egypt in November, and I know most people ask me if I was really going because nearby there's obviously an exacerbation of the conflict, not in the Middle East, because the Middle East is a really large place, but it is specifically in Gaza and Israel and Palestine. Gaza is part of Palestine. So people would ask, like, I got comments from people that I didn't even really know. They'd be like, well, the Middle East, like, that's a really scary place. And I was like, first of all, I've been there. Second of all, I wouldn't go where I've been right now. But the Middle East goes from like parts of Africa up into like close to Russia. Like, what are you talking about? Like some countries you wouldn't want to go to and other ones are totally safe. Egypt is one of those safe countries. Jordan is one of those safe countries. And what it came down to too, it isn't just that I have an opinion, but that like our guides, we had to trust our guides. So if I hadn't been to Israel and Palestine a decade ago, I may have been a lot more worried. But here's pictures, our guides, the guy in the white shirt there, and then the guy pushing the wheelchair here. Those were our two guides in Egypt. And trusting people is really important because they know what it's like on the ground. Egypt hasn't had problems. In the 1990s, there were problems with attacking tourists, but that was when I was a child, back like when I went to Italy. So trusting people on the ground is really important because they know what's safe. And in other places, not just specifically here, they mentioned it, but in other places, they have perceptions about our country too and how it's not safe here. So it's important to realize that like, we know it's pretty safe to be here. We don't worry about going out every day. But they worry even less about going out every day, to be honest. So because Egypt is a safe country, Cairo, I believe, is rated one of the safest countries in the entire world. And in both places, I didn't feel unsafe at all. I've definitely been in places in the US where I felt less safe than there. So I think that like it was an emotional trip to go on in that like, first of all, it was my last continent. And that was like my goal from my grandpa, was going to that last continent. So that part was always going to be emotional, but then to like have to overcome that people thought that it wouldn't be safe for me, even though I knew that I could trust people. And then come back and tell them that it is safe. And if you would like to go to either of those countries, they are safe and it is a great time because people are scared to go there. So there's not many tourists. So if you want to be able to see things better, honestly, I mean, like it's not good for the tourism industry, but they want people to come, they're safe, and you get a better view than if you wait till you feel that it's safe. So in Egypt, they have military police all over the place, which they said is more so that we feel safe than really that they're needed. I don't have them, we had somebody on our bus, we were on a tour, so we had somebody on our bus all the time, and then in the more touristy parts, like in Cairo, they were all over, like near the museum and the squares that people gather more. So, so that is Egypt. So trust people. And I think that's a theme throughout all of these, is like staying in a couch surfer's house, you have to trust them. They have to trust you. So there's a lot of trusting people. So there is a surprise here at the end, because there is actually an 8th continent that I learned about in Antarctica. One of our National Geographic guides let us know that Zealandia is also considered a small continent, but a continent nonetheless, and most of it's underwater. So we did go, I didn't know that I'd been to it, so I've now, Africa is my 8th continent. But I didn't know that until I went to Antarctica so I'd already been to an extra continent by then. So here's some pictures from New Zealand. I had some other pictures earlier in here, but the lesson with this one is be open to revelations that'll change how you see the world. So I went to New Zealand and the revelation wasn't there, but then when I learned later that I'd been to another continent, now I know that there are 7 continents. And this picture here is actually from, it is from Nubia in Egypt. And another revelation I had is, if you look at the numbers, I was never taught, and if somebody I met in the last week said that they knew it, but like with our numbers, which are Arabic numbers, each number has that number of angles in it, which I never knew before. So if you look at the picture here, you can kind of see it, you don't probably write them with all those angles in it. But that was another thing that I was like, whoa, like that makes so much sense. So that's another thing that could change how you see the world or how you write things. So here are the lessons that I had, if you wanted to look through them again. Because you might want to know where I've been. These are the countries I've been to. Maybe more visually, there's a map of them. The red ones I've visited, like on the ground. I've lived in, I guess, the States, and then I've been in Taiwan as well. You can barely see Taiwan, but they're the blue stripes. I've been in an airport. I feel like those don't quite count. So I've made them a different color. And then in Brazil, I was like on a boat on that side of the river. So I was in Brazil, but not quite. And then I've seen some from the sky. So that's the yellow ones, because you fly over them. So those are the places I've been. We're going to Alaska this summer. So I have not been to all 50 states, but we were supposed to during COVID. And so I would have been to all 50 states before. All of the continents, all 8 continents. So I didn't quite know how to finish this. So I was reading last night in a little bit about maple syruping in the Glyphic magazine. That's a Great Lakes Fish and Wildlife Commission. And this sentence stuck out to me. So our teachings evolve from our relationship to the landscape. So these are a lot of different landscapes that I've been a part of, mostly for a small bit of time. But anybody, like, you don't have to travel the whole world to know these things. You can know them here. You can get to know where you live a lot better. You can get to, we can go back to like all of these lessons and like go through and see how we can do these things right here. You can trust people here. You can get off the beaten track right here in Northwest Wisconsin. Have cultural humility and understand the Native people that live with us better. Be open to revelations. I mean, even just coming here, you probably learn some new things that might change how you see the world. So connecting with where you are, no matter where it is, kind of going back to my grandpa's lesson, is kind of what I hope we can all do. And then this was one more quote I had from Sherry Moraga that it stood out to me when I was reading. She had an essay I read a couple weeks ago that I thought the whole essay was excellent. So I have the link in there. But like when I was 8 years old and floating way out in the Pacific Ocean, past the waves breaking, you just lie on the tube and the sun is setting and your back is away from the city. And you're just looking out onto the horizon. In those moments of that kind of awareness, your personality disappears. And when your personality disappears, you become part of the collective we. In those moments, without prejudice, your little ego just goes away because you are surrounded by something so much grander than you. That's the human experience too. And that's why all those rich people spend so much money trying to buy a connection to the earth. How do we allow for people to know at a deeper level when the pace of things grows increasingly fast? You have to slow down for that to happen. If anyone has questions. I see I have a chat here. Okay. Continue traveling? I'll continue traveling. I feel like you can't, I mean, unless the pandemic stops you from leaving, you can't quite stop. So I'm going to Alaska this summer. And like I want to ski. So the Birkie happens here, and then there's 19 races around the world that also happen in different countries. So I've done 6 of those. So I want to get to at least 10, but I'd like to do them all. So like those are some of my little things, and yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so Zealandia is it's New Zealand, but like most of Zealandia, the continent, so New Zealand is what's above water. Zealandia is mostly underwater though. Yeah, it would be like that's like the high points of it. Yeah. So. And this is an article about it from the Geological Society of America. If you look it up, like there was some National Geographic stuff to find too. So. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Australia government rented land to the indigenous people for that. But did you find that in any other country where the government would rent anything from indigenous people? They really recognize.
Yeah. Well, they recognized it in weird, but kind of like it's like they told them that people had to climb it though, so it's like they were kind of still in charge. I don't think I haven't always known to ask questions. Ecuador, which I didn't mention at all in here, Ecuador, I think has had pretty decent relationships with their indigenous people compared to most countries. Although I think the government changed and that might not be as true today as it was when I was there a couple of years ago. I haven't always, I think usually like the indigenous people don't own the land that visitors are going to unless it's like with the Maori people, when we went to visit their village, they may have owned that, but that was like their own choice. So as opposed to like a national park being rented by the government. So, yeah.
So much to think about.
Yeah. And I do have a blog as well, and I have cards. So if you want to read about my travels since Australia, so since 2018, that's when I started the blog. But I have cards here. So that's the Adventures of Anna. If you want to read about my ski travels, which are some of the places, that's the ski travel one. And there's also paddling and ice age trail hiking. So you get some local. So I have 4 blogs, but if people want cards, I'll put them here. Then I'll be around if you have questions or whatever. So.
I didn't want to ask the question because I didn't know if everybody would be interested. Our next trip is to go to Buenos Aires, down around the trip to Santiago. Do you have any advice for me as far as doing that? So I've never been to South America.
So you're going to Buenos Aires. Well, that's probably are you going to Ushuaia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I get your email or
yeah?
Then it's like then I can like write up more and
Sure.
I take my blog because I definitely wrote about Argentina.
Okay.
In there. Okay. So yeah. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. You might not get off the beaten track quite as much as me. Yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah. This is fine.